Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is the 6th episode of Season 3. My name is Adil Ahmad, and I have Misophonia. This week I'm talking to Ashton, television journalist based in Kentucky. You may have seen her requests for interviews since she's also a grad student working on a documentary about misophonia for her thesis. We talk about all that, her experiences in her family with miso, she's definitely not the only one, and a lot more. Hey, so if you check out the website misophoniapodcast.com, you'll see a new version rolling out this week. Still some wet paint, but I'm really excited about it. There'll be separate pages for each interview, including transcripts, which are rolling out gradually, for those who don't want to listen to voices speaking. There's also a place for text interviews, some of which are taking place right now. So stay tuned, and as always, let me know what you think by emailing hello@misophoniapodcast.com or on Instagram @misophoniapodcast, Twitter @misophoniashow. Anyways, here is this week's conversation with Ashton. Ashton, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I know we talked, I don't even remember when it was, sometime earlier this year.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe talk about, kind of what you do, where you are?
Yeah, of course. So this was maybe 2 weeks ago that we talked. I'm not exactly sure. But I'm a student at Western Kentucky University. I'm a senior, and I'm working on my honors thesis. And I chose misophonia because it's something that I've dealt with since, I don't know, maybe 10 years old. As long as I can really remember that I started noticing, my surroundings, basically. And so I wanted to talk more about that and explore the subject more and let people know that it was real, because I really struggled with convincing people that I was facing something that was real. And so what I'm trying to do now is go talk to experts and talk to people who have misophonia and gather some more research and visuals for my documentary. So my thesis is going to be a documentary because I'm in broadcasting and it's what I know. So I'd like to be able to explain to people visually and with all these different experiences that I have, and show them what it feels like to have misophonia.
I'll have your information in the show notes if researchers want to reach out, or
Yeah.
and you actually just reached out to me on Twitter, so that's good. If anybody else is out there and looking to do some research, I'm always happy to chat. But the other piece is this documentary, since you are in news and in broadcasting, I know everyone's trying to get the word out, so it's always nice to hear about another documentary project potentially in the works. I'm sure you'll get a lot of people interested in wanting to contribute to that if you wanted that.
Yeah, and I went and I watched the documentary that you recommended to me, and there were some really great stories in there. But I think what I want to do that's different than that, and what I think it kind of missed out on, is to really give people that don't have misophonia the chance to understand what it would be like. I just I want to bring people to the realization of what these things sound like to us, and why it's annoying, why it's a problem. Just get really up close and personal in the kind of noises that really bother us. Because if you were overwhelmed with enough sound, you would understand what it felt like. And I'd really like to have the audience in our heads feeling what that is like.
Yeah, that's an interesting angle. Because there's always it's always hard to explain to people. They initially, I'm sure you've experienced, they often think that it's just an annoyance, and they have it too, and why can't we just get over it? But it's a whole other level, right?
Right. Yeah, it's a completely different feeling than being annoyed by something. It's being infuriated by it.
Right. Yeah. So, and yeah, I guess let's go back. You mentioned that, something that you've dealt with since you're roughly 10 years of age. Do you want to talk about those kind of early years and what it was like for you?
Yeah. I can't really pinpoint an exact age or I realized it, but one that really gets me is snoring. Like that's something that really bothers me. And when I was younger, we would go stay with my family in Texas, and we have a big family, very small house out there in Texas. And so it'd be like 15 of us in this one house. So we'd all stay like together in the living room. So it'd be like me, my mom, and my two brothers. I actually don't know that the youngest one was born yet, but it would be at least me and my brother. And he snores so loud. And when I was
Mm.
younger, it like I would go over to him and I would plug his nose and his mouth until he woke up. And then he'd like get up like gasping and be like, stop snoring. But like I just couldn't handle it. And I didn't want to do that to him, but it was annoying me so much. Or maybe I'd go over to him and I'd nudge him or slap him or roll him over or something like that. Um, because it was just so bad. And it was so bad because he has a deviated septum. So you can
Uh-huh.
imagine how much worse the snoring was to me because of that. And then from there on, it just kind of developed more and more. Popcorn is one of my really big triggers, and it's really upsetting because I love going to the movies and I can't sit there for 2 hours with somebody eating popcorn behind me. It's brutal. But I still go
Do
all
you
the
have your
time.
kind of favorite seat? Yeah, do you I mean how do you negotiate that? Do you go to different seats? Do you plug
Yeah,
in
well,
headphones?
it got to be a little more difficult, and in theaters, I mean, this was pre-COVID, of course, but they would start doing assigned seats, so you would pick your seats before you had to stay in that spot. So moving around was not an option. So what I would do is I would bring a pair of headphones, and if it was really bad, I would put my headphones in and play music for probably the first 20 minutes of the movie, because after 20 minutes you'll get a lot of people that are like done with their food, and after that it's okay.
Yeah. Yep.
But I mean, there was one time I went to see Wonder Woman. I think it was already my second or third time going, so at least there was just somebody being so loud the whole movie. I couldn't even handle it. I had to walk out, and I left my friends there. And I just waited until the movie was over, and then I met them afterwards because I couldn't handle it.
And what did they say? I mean, were they?
They,
I'm assuming they're friends. They're familiar
yes,
with your condition, or maybe okay,
they
yeah.
were, but that was
They're just nodding and yeah.
that was like the
Mm-hmm.
first time that they really had a grasp of how much it affected me, because I was like on the verge of a breakdown. I just told them I couldn't handle it and I waited outside.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. That's. I mean, yeah. It can be. You never know what you're walking into, basically.
Right. It's always
It's like
different. Like,
a den of horrors. Yeah. Exactly. Or a hall of horrors.
mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned snoring was one of your earliest because obviously, like, snoring annoys so many people, but I
Yeah.
haven't actually heard of it as that much as a one of those early triggers. It's kind of ironic. Did it start to very quickly expand to other family members and eating, or was it or
Yeah.
basically kind of focused on that? I'm trying to see how it
It
evolved, just kind of during childhood and in high school, maybe.
So that was the first one that I noticed, in addition to like the sound of breathing. That was also one of his things, like while he was snoring, because of course he had a deviated septum. So those were two big factors. And then it kind of went into food also, but that was never really a problem at home because my dad was very serious about the way that people ate. I don't know if it was
Manners,
because of
yeah.
the same thing or just I don't know what it was, but like we always had to eat very cleanly. So it actually helped because that was never something I had to deal with at home. But when I went to school, that started to become a problem. I was actually homeschooled for the first, let's see, until I was in sixth grade. And then from sixth grade to eighth grade, I
Oh,
went to a private school. So from there to there, it wasn't really a problem either because I only had five classmates. So you spend your whole time around these
wow.
five people. If you have an issue, you just tell them. And it's not
Yeah.
really that big of a deal.
And then it will suddenly be four people, and then three
Yeah,
people.
right,
You can
exactly. That is exactly what happened.
knock them off one by one.
Um,
Um,
And high school was actually the first time that I went to public school from ninth to 12th grade.
Oh,
And then I definitely had issues with, the way that people would eat, like at lunch and during tests, the way that I could hear other people, like doing, I don't know, doing whatever, tapping, breathing really loud, just kind of being annoying. That kind of became an issue. Um,
wow. So yeah, you transitioned from like one homeschool to small school to just like a free for all.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody talk to anybody who's kind of gone through transition like that for a misophone. That's got to be
It
quite the dramatic
it
transitions
was pretty
during a pretty
different.
formative period. Wow. Is there any chance that maybe your dad also had it?
I think it would be a couple people. My dad probably his it's a little bit different for him. He actually has tinnitus. Um, so that's
Oh,
probably something that he would think of first before that. My aunt definitely does. That would be my dad's brother. And my youngest brother, he's only 10 and he has a very severe case.
oh,
um,
he does. Okay.
yes.
Do you talk to him about it?
Um, a little bit. It's kind of a little bit different. So like I didn't think that it was misophonia until I talked to Tom Dozer about it because he was,
Mm-hmm.
saying it can be more like a physiological response and it can be triggered by visuals. And he will absolutely like freak out if you talk about Cheez-Its or like the smell of
Oh,
certain things. So like it's a little bit different, but like what Tom Dozer said about misophonia like led me to think that maybe it's a little bit connected. And he
yeah. I
definitely
mean,
has a
I've
problem
heard that.
with this one sound like a like that sound drives him
Mm-hmm.
crazy and he'll just like scream and like run around and cry and freak out.
Yeah. Do you know if he's potentially on the spectrum too? Maybe being overloaded by stimuli or.
No, I think that he has had different social circumstances. He doesn't have like a lot of like friends his age, but he's very good at communicating with adults because he's always
Ah.
been around us. So he hasn't really been in school for very long, and he can't be
So
really.
is he going through the same type of school transition as you did, like
Not
homeschool to
exactly.
private to
He
okay.
did go to public school, but obviously right now they're not like going to school exactly. And then before this, I don't know. I couldn't say for sure exactly what his
Yeah.
relationship is with his classmates. He's like me. He doesn't talk about it a whole lot. And my parents always thought I didn't have friends, but that wasn't true. I actually was very good with people. I just wasn't. I didn't like adults to see me being good with people. Um, so I would
Oh,
suspect it's something
interesting.
like that.
Well, can I just poke out? What did
Yeah.
you mean by you don't want adults to see you
I
being
just
good with people? I'm just curious.
I would get like embarrassed if
Yeah.
adults saw me interacting with other kids. There was just something about it, and it was specific adults, like people that I knew, like my parents or,
Yeah.
it didn't bother me if a teacher saw me being friends with another kid, but
Gotcha.
if it were my parents,
Yeah.
I'd feel embarrassed, and I couldn't really tell you
Okay.
why.
Yeah. No, it has nothing to do with me, so and I'm not gonna yeah dwell on it. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of
Yeah.
curious. Um, and okay, yeah. So what was I gonna say? Yeah, so yeah, well, and regardless, you did say you didn't have your parents didn't think you had a lot of friends.
Hmm.
When you're growing up, was that actually? I know you said you're good with people. Was that actually the case? Was it like was potentially miso affecting your social circles?
I would say to a degree, it definitely did affect it. It made me dislike certain people. So there were instances throughout. I can't exactly pinpoint like who they might have been or when it was, but I know that there have been people that I would maybe hang around with and they would just maybe eat really weird or gross or do things that really upset my misophonia so I just wouldn't be friends with them because I knew it wasn't something I could handle long term.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, I'm willing to give up a certain amount of comfortability or comfort to be able
Comfort. Yeah.
to be friends with someone, but I have to really want to be friends with them.
Yeah. Yeah. We all have to we all have that, set that threshold or balance,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere on that dial. Um, and what were your so I'm assuming, yeah, at that age, well, basically earlier on in your life, you didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of your coping mechanisms? Obviously, leaving situations, was
Yeah.
one. Were you grabbing headphones, at that point,
Um,
or
so
doing any, or mimicking?
at that point, I would probably a lot of times I would sit like where my elbows like down and my finger is just like kind of pressing on my ear, like just in a way that's not super obvious to people that I'm like covering my ears and stuff, which I thought was really interesting because I talked to another girl who had misophonia, and she told me she did the exact same thing without any prompting. So I think that might
Yeah.
be something that a couple people do, just kind of like to conceal that you're trying not to listen to them. So
Hmm.
I did that a lot, and I got the headphones at some point. I don't remember exactly when that was. And then obviously getting away from people, just kind of going out of the room, which I tried not to do all the time because I would get in trouble for it. Because they'd be like,
Yeah.
"Why are you running over there? What's your
Yeah.
deal?
Yeah.
We're just eating. What's your
Right.
problem?"
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, you can do the different things like you just eat a lot faster
Yeah.
and then offer to do chores or something like that.
Just to
Um,
kind of run out of the room, be done. Um,
yeah, yeah. Were your while you were going through all this stuff, were your other family members also showing symptoms, around the same time, or were you just kind of finding some of this out later, like
yeah,
your
I
brother? I
think
guess your brother is quite a bit younger than you, right?
he's 10 or more, almost 11 years younger than me. And so he wouldn't have been born around this time that it really started to become an issue. I would say that my dad had it during that time, but he didn't know what it was either. And for him, he'll just say, "That's annoying, stop doing it." And then we have to stop doing it because we're the kids. So stuff like that was not an issue for him. But since, I was the kid, they weren't going to listen to me if I asked them to stop doing something like that. So it really took a lot of convincing for them to realize why it was bothering me, and for me to actually pull out the resources and say, I
Yeah.
found this information, it's real, this happens to other people. And then some of my family members would be like, oh, I think I have that, like these things really bother me. So like my
Is that how you
dad,
got
my
your
aunt.
aunt?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gotcha.
they started to
What around
realize.
when was that? Around when was that?
And not too long ago, maybe
Yeah.
when I was graduating high school, sometime
Okay.
around then. Could have even been the
Okay.
first couple years of college.
Yeah. So obviously that led you to a path that you're, now like on your way to becoming a misophonia media mogul
Hmm.
with, documentaries and publications and research. Yeah, I'm just curious how that, did you, a lot of us when we first find out about it, we're just like researching all night long and
Right.
sharing links and stuff. So, was that kind of the same situation with you where you just got sucked into, learning about it?
Yeah.
Or has it just been kind of something that, maybe an opportunity came up recently, or obviously
Hmm.
at school, and you're just kind of taking those opportunities?
Well, I kind of just I think about it a lot. Like I'm always thinking about how it affects me, and when something comes up that really bothers me, I'm thinking about new ways to adapt. For a while there, I was going to invest in some very expensive headphones to get rid of noise and stuff, and so it's just something that I'm constantly thinking about 24/7. And I obviously got to senior year, need a senior thesis, and I'd actually been planning on something else for a really long time. But then just with the pandemic, it didn't seem like I'd be able to work on this other project because I really needed to be
Mm.
with people and engage
Up
with
close.
people. Right. And so
Yeah,
I was like,
gotcha.
well, it's very last minute. This was maybe a week or two before the thesis proposal was due. And so I was like, what else could I do it on? And I had been thinking about this subject a lot. I just hadn't
Yeah,
decided on it. I was like, well, why not? You know, that's going to be easy to gather research over Zoom, and I can gather visuals from every day. These things are out the world all the time. And
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
the research is out there. It's not very much, but that makes it that much more interesting because how many people have really talked about this, and it needs to be talked about. So I struggled to get it out there really quick, but I think it was a sign that it was meant to be because I needed a secondary professor. I had no one, so I contacted everyone in the psychology and behavioral departments, and one person said she would do it. And so it worked out from there. And I was,
So, was there a chance that if none of the professors accepted it, you couldn't be you couldn't do it, or
yeah, I wouldn't have been able to do it because I needed two professors and I needed at least one who was in the subject. So
oh,
my primary professor, he would have done whatever I wanted to do, but he's a
yeah,
broadcasting professor. So
okay.
his applies generally, and then I needed to have someone who would then be the secondary professor with an interest in it at least.
Were you getting like like actively turned down? Like people were saying
Yes,
this is
like they
BS.
were saying,
Oh, okay.
not that the subject, but they're like, I don't know what this is. I have no idea how to, research this.
Well,
What
you're
this
about to
is.
find out, lady.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I was
Or
trying to convince
gentlemen.
them of.
Yeah.
It was
Right.
that I know what I'm doing. I don't need you to know. I just need you to sign this piece
Mm-hmm.
of paper and
Yeah,
pretend that
exactly.
you're interested.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was getting turned down by a lot of people, or that it was too close to the time because you are supposed to find this professor probably months in advance. But
Right.
I had my other one set up. I just had a quick turnaround to do something else.
Okay, you got a professor and
Mm-hmm.
to accept it, and okay, great. And so yeah, I'm curious, like how do you have like a particular thesis, or is it more you're kind of like an idea that you're trying to prove or investigate, or
Yeah, so
is it yeah,
it's more like a subject that I'm investigating, kind of, and
from a broadcasting perspective, like
right,
from a this is more from a journal, not so much a psychological analysis. It's
exactly.
more
More from
yeah.
a journalist perspective, which I think is a lot better because you don't have to go in there and try to prove things. I'm not a scientist. I just have to find the
Oh, this is
scientists who
great. This
do
is
know.
unique. Yeah. I mean, we need a lot of regular research, but
Hmm.
this is yeah, we need as many disciplines looking at this as possible. So this
Right.
is great.
I think
Very fast, interesting.
more than anything, sometimes what you need is exposure. And you can do as much research as you want, but if nobody knows about it, then there's the issue. And it's not gonna reach a broader audience without someone to broadcast it out there. So that's what I'm
Yeah,
trying to do.
and yeah, and so I know you're just in the middle of it, and I'm sure will we be able to see it when it's done,
Oh
or is
yeah,
this
of course.
kind of okay? Yeah,
I'll
gotcha.
figure
Anything
out what.
interesting that you've learned so far already that
Yes.
that
I was talking to Tom Dozer about it, and we went across the idea that I mentioned earlier that it's a physiological issue, and so when we really started to talk about that, it got me thinking because he said if you can take away the physical response, then you'll take away a lot of that emotional response. And he said figure out what your trigger point is and it'll help. So I kept thinking about that a lot. And I'd noticed that recently, and mine hadn't been as bad as it's been in the past. And a lot of that is to do with the pandemic because there are less people around and, less commotion. But my big physiological response or like physical response was to tighten up my jaw really tight. And just a year ago, I got TMJ in my jaw from a surgery. And since that point, I have to be very conscious of how tight my jaw is. Like I'm always just fully aware of what it feels like and making sure that it's nice and like loose and relaxed. And I've noticed since then that I felt like things didn't bother me as much as they had. Like I
Mm.
wasn't as stressed out. And I wouldn't say they go away because I definitely can still get mad by them. But it seemed like it was a little bit less bad. And, that was always something that I was just constantly doing, was just like being stressed in my jaw. And now I have to be completely conscious of that and making sure that I'm not doing that because it's very
Oh,
painful. Um,
yeah, yeah, I gotcha.
and then I'm sure you've heard of TMJ, but it's just basically like a muscle issue and like arthritis kind of in your jaw. So it's pretty annoying. But
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard of that actually, but okay, yeah. And so Tom was talking about it,
hmm
p- like a physiological link
yes.
potentially,
So like
or okay,
you have a physical link to it. Maybe your shoulders tense up or um, you just yeah, just certain things that you do in your body tense up your wrists or your hands or something like that. And one of mine was definitely my jaw. Now that looking back,
gotcha. And now that you're conscious, so it's been affecting, um, it, it's kind of affecting your relation to misophonia as
yeah,
well.
I would say that it's when I'm consciously relaxed of it, it's a little
Relaxing
bit
it.
less
Yeah,
terrible. And I think
gotcha.
because that's just one of the things that like that'll just instantly stress you out if you're clenching your jaw.
Yeah, I mean,
It sends
stress is
like
a huge,
shockwaves
yeah.
through.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously, stretch is a huge catalyst, and people talk about just kind of preparing their mind before they walk into a situation that they could that where they could be where they could be triggered to kind of relax, and that can kind of help, or
mhm.
take deep breaths or whatever. Interesting. Yeah. Um, yeah. Any other? Yeah. Anything you've have you talked to like sufferers as well, or for
Yeah,
your for this thesis,
I
and kind
haven't
of maybe
talked
heard
to
any
as many
interesting?
yet as I
Yeah,
would like to. Um, I, I did talk to one girl. It was interesting because her experiences were a lot like mine, which was kind of cool. It was almost mirrored, and it got me thinking about how many similarities there are in this from person to person that I've heard. But she just
oh yeah, there's sometimes I can just like listen,
right.
and it's like I'm hearing my audio autobiography read back to me. It's quite eerie sometimes.
Right. It's really crazy how many similarities there are. Um, so her case wasn't too bad, but still enough to bother her in everyday life. So she had a lot of the same triggers with breathing and snoring and um, a couple like tapping type noises. And she was actually very cognizant of what was going on. It was really interesting to me because she talked about how the intervals of sound would bother her. So she was like anything in an interval of, I think she said like 45 seconds or something like that. She was like, that is a trigger for me. Like something within that time frame can be a trigger for me. And that was the exact same thing that Tom Dozer was telling me, was that anything in these certain intervals of time can then become a trigger noise. And it was just so crazy to hear how aware she was of it and not even having done any research really of just how the sounds would then bother her.
So by intervals, do you mean like 45 seconds? So like something repeat, something you hear something, and then
Yes, like
within 45 seconds you hear it again.
yeah, any more like anything. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Put this the best way as possible, but yeah, maybe you hear something within. It might have even been a smaller amount of time, maybe like 15 seconds. So like you hear a noise, like a constant noise, for like 15 seconds or something like that, and then it comes back again. I'm not exactly sure if it was that way or the opposite way, but it was like anything that repeats. So you hear something
Yeah.
in repetition. You hear like a tick, 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 and then tick, 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 tick. So like the same amount of time in
Oh yeah.
between. So
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
like that
No,
really bothered her.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Repetitive sounds. I've
Hmm.
heard that a lot as being a trigger, and then it just kind of snowballs because that anticipation starts to
Right.
gnaw at your whatever rotten part of your brain misophonia
Right.
is. Interesting. Yeah, cool. And as now that you're, how about kind of like in your day to day, like you're in broadcasting, you're in
Hmm.
a newsroom. I'm assuming. Um,
Yes.
what's it like yeah, oh, I guess what yeah, what's your day to day like? I guess you get to go outside, right, in the
Right.
office when there's no COVID going on.
Hmm it's actually a pretty perfect career for me because I don't have to be stuck inside all the time. Before this job, I was working a job on campus and I just kind of worked in an office area. And it became a really big issue around lunchtime when one of my coworkers would pull out chips and start eating a bag of chips really loud. So I would get up and take like a I wouldn't even take a lunch break. I would just go walk around for as long as possible and then come back. But
Right.
now in the newsroom, it hasn't been too much of an issue. A lot of times I'm the only person in the newsroom because of COVID. Most of the reporters work from home. And I'm kind of hoping that's a ongoing thing because um,
Yeah, just
it's
stay remote. You do your
it's
own stories wherever you
right.
are. Yeah, be
It's pretty
extra
great.
hyper
Like
local.
I'm one of the only ones not working from home just because I'm new, I'm part time, and we don't have enough equipment for everyone to go do their stuff at home. So I basically get the whole newsroom to myself a lot of times. On Sundays, I am literally the only person there for probably like 10 hours. And so it hasn't really been an issue because I get in, I set my stuff up, I go run, I go shoot that stuff. And, the commotion of everyday life doesn't bother me. I love when there's a lot going on and I can't focus on anything. I can't pinpoint one thing that's bothering me because there's just so much happening. So it's like,
Yeah.
you run to an interview, you talk to that person for 15, 20 minutes, you run to the next one, go get your footage, and then you come back and you put your headphones on and you edit for the rest of the time. You don't have to
Yeah.
interact with anyone if you don't want to. I've only had
Well, the
one.
thing,
Yeah, I was just gonna say I've only had one issue with one of the managers there who will eat stuff really annoying. But a lot of the times I'm not there for lunchtime, so it's not really a problem.
right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I was just gonna say it's if you're running around, and I think your brain just realizes, all right,
Hmm.
if anything's triggering me, we're out of here in a few minutes anyway, so
Right.
I can chill. Um, yeah, that seems like a relatively for people looking for
Hmm.
career paths. This seems like a pretty relatively good one.
Right. Well, it always keeps your brain moving. So, like, you just don't have
Mhm.
time to focus on things. And you can leave literally whenever you want. You can go wherever you want. As long as you get your stuff in on time, you're good to go.
Yeah. Have you have you kind of like as you've been doing this, have you looked at the what the landscape is for other news stories that have been news stories that have been created about misophonia, maybe at a even at a local level around the country? I don't know if you have
Yeah, I mean,
if you've kind of looked around
I haven't found any. Um,
like in some small town,
right.
ABC channel or whatever, somebody's like done a story. I'm sure there have been. We
I'm,
just don't know about them because we don't live
yeah,
there.
I'll have to look around and maybe check some of our file and video and stuff. I'll have to look around. I'm not exactly sure. I certainly haven't heard of one, but doesn't mean that there's not
Hmm.
one. There definitely could be. I think that sometimes there are a lot of things that are connected to misophonia, but that's not your go-to of what it is as far as
Yeah.
the general public. I definitely think there are a lot of violence cases that are related to misophonia. I would not be surprised because you'll hear of
Yeah.
things sometimes that people will say, "Oh, that's a crazy story." He said he stabbed her because she wouldn't stop chewing gum or something like
Yeah.
that. Like that's definitely happened, but nobody would pinpoint it to misophonia. They're just going to take him to jail.
No, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know of any that direct, but yeah, I'm sure there's stuff we don't know about. But I'm sure even more likely is just somebody is happens to be worked up all day from
Mm-hmm.
misophonia and then snaps for another reason.
Yes.
Because this can get you to a really bad mental state, and then something else could really make you snap. I would think,
Mm-hmm.
potentially, God forbid, but you know, but
Right.
it's since we're talking about like potential, news stories about incidents. I just we were, we're always talking. You're right. We're always thinking about like looking for that direct incident,
Mm-hmm.
but it just got me thinking that there could be a lot of indirect because of um, how this can really take over your brain, and when
Right.
you're really on the edge. So
I think there definitely could
um,
be. And you know what? That
that
would
might be
be
another
the
interesting
ultimate thing if I could find
research
that.
project.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that would be yeah, an interesting climax for your documentary
Mm-hmm.
is to find that story. Actually, I want to do some googling.
I know.
Um,
Well, now I'm
anyways,
thinking maybe I can find an inmate who's in there
oh
because of this.
yeah, it's just oh yeah, that's kind of interesting.
That would
Maybe there'll be a Shawshank Redemption kind of movie
right.
based on this. I don't know if we're going to a dark place here or just really brainstorming it, but
Well, it would just be it'd
God
be
forbid
very
anybody's.
interesting. And I feel
Yeah,
like it
yeah,
must have
no, this is
happened at some point.
yeah, yeah. I wonder if there is some kind of a record of like, parole transcripts or something, and then somebody
Mm-hmm.
reveals later in their life that actually she was just chewing her gum, ha ha ha, ha,
Right.
and gets denied parole. Um, probably start wrapping up soon, but I'm curious on now that your family knows about it and
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of more, um, you're kind of more vocal about it. How are things for you now? Like, are you pretty comfortable talking to? It seems like you're pretty comfortable talking to your friends, and
Yeah.
holidays are probably relatively okay if people are aware about it. About
Yeah.
it.
And with my direct family, it's not really a big issue, and since I would say they all have a little bit of it. It just wasn't something that was brought to their attention until I started telling them about it. But it's definitely all good now. It's not something that I'm afraid to bring up. And they kind of know, like when they hear something that's going to annoy me or when they're doing something that's going to be really annoying, they'll apologize for it and then stop doing it. So it really hasn't been an issue since then with my direct family. And with my friends, most of them know. I wouldn't say that all of them know. There are some of them that I don't really want to bring it up to, but with
But
the
if they need to
college
know,
life,
they'll know.
right? If they need to know, they'll know. But I don't see them enough for it to become an issue right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll have obviously I'm gonna have a bunch of your info, well, whatever you're interested in sharing
Mm-hmm.
in the show notes and whatnot, especially if you're looking for anyone to talk to. Is there anything you want to anything you want to tell people or plug or whatever about what you learned or just about miso?
Yeah. Well, I would just first like people to reach out to me if they've had an experience with misophonia. I'd like to get my hands on any interviews that I can because everybody's experience is relatively similar but different in some way, and I really would like to build that up because it's hard to build this story for other people to see if I don't have the right elements and enough people talking to me about it. But I would definitely say for other people who have been struggling, I think this is actually kind of a great time for us because we can work from home and we don't have to interact with all these people. Everything has been cut in half. And, if it's been rough before this point, I think it's going to be a lot better after this. The current circumstances are not great just as far as COVID and, sickness and always being on your guard. But for misophonia, it's not a bad time. It's going to be a lot better from here on out in that regard.
I agree, and I hope a lot of these practices, like staying the f away from
Right.
people,
And I think that
kind of
they
continues.
will. My dad works in IT for Dollar General, and they've already decided everyone will work from home in IT, forever.
Yep.
Like that's just their deal
Yeah.
now.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, because you hear about it in the news for like the
Hmm.
big tech companies, but it's good to see that it's coming down to a lot of the smaller companies as well. Who I mean, they have their big companies actually have the money to keep those offices, but the
Right.
small companies don't. So I think it makes more sense for them to look at creative ways to
Hmm.
keep quality quality employees like your dad,
Right.
and just kind of let them be flexible.
Right. And he loves
That's very
it,
cool.
so he just works from home now.
Sweet. Um, and yeah, and the other thing, we'll definitely have contact information to reach out to you, and yeah, and related to kind of what we were talking about a few minutes ago. If
Hmm.
anyone wants to share whatever stories you want, I'd be also be curious about some of these potentially risque subjects,
Yes.
or not say risque, but I mean controversial maybe.
Right.
Would be kind of interesting if anyone we'll find a way to share those stories anonymously or something. But
Right. Yeah, and I'm definitely familiar with doing anonymous stuff. But
oh
yeah, I'd
yeah,
like
yeah,
to get
you're the
those.
perfect person to talk to. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly.
Right. I'm a safe person to talk to. I've dealt with a lot of anonymous interviews, so I know what I'm
Yeah,
doing.
yeah, absolutely. This is great. Well, yeah, Ashton, I want to thank you. It was great talking to you. Whenever we talked a while back, this whole year has been a blur. But
Right.
thank you for reaching out to me, and thanks for that again, just kind of coming on here for the podcast. This is going to help a lot of people. A very unique perspective too.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just really excited to do it.
Thank you, Ashton. It was great to talk again, and I can't wait to see the thesis project once it's complete. Maybe have her on again. Please reach out to Ashton. If you'd like to help, I'll have info on the website and in the show notes here. If you're enjoying the shows, please consider hitting the 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. It helps people discover the podcast by appearing a little bit higher. Otherwise, hit me up on Instagram or Facebook, Misophonia Podcast, or Twitter, Misophonia Show. Music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.